All right, guys, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, May 22nd. And look at the range that we had today in the indices. All of 10 basis points, a tenth of a percentage point. So, yeah, we'll go over this. It's a little bit frustrating if you're an active trader and, trying to trade more options than stock. I think just bottom line trading the last couple days, intraday trading is not easy. There are some names that have been, had a little bit of momentum to them, but overall, I see a lot of names that are just, they're just not moving, and they're not moving enough to even try a trade. So, you could argue with me on this one, but if you're sitting on your hands a bit and being patient for the overall move to kind of take place in a little bit of momentum to come back into this market, I think you're doing the right thing by not trading. That's what I've been advocating. By the way, here is the move for the indices. I wasn't joking around. From the open, right? Of course, overall, it's going to be a different move. SPY moved. SPY actually moved today, down 30 basis points. But from the open, you are talking about less than a tenth of a percentage point, so 6 basis points. Q's not much better there either. Up 10 basis points from the open, still finished in the red by 45 basis points. The diamonds down, moved a tenth of a percentage point from open to close. IWM, which I'm going to look at that chart in a second, that one was a little bit more under pressure, but held the support that it needed to. So energy and gas were the big movers today. Again, this is not percentage for the day, but percentage from the open to the close. Energy really got hit hard as oil sold off. Big energy inventories again. So there's plenty of supply. It seems like, and crude is starting to go down and starting to get hit pretty hard. So let's circle back to some of the movers of the day, but let's go over a little bit of a macro review. So yeah, this is what I'm advocating, or again, I don't give recommendations or advice or anything like this, but I said this earlier. I said, not trying to be negative, but this feels like yesterday's price action. Very difficult to find trending names. And I'm trying to, this is kind of like for me, when I write these things out, it's also, not only to kind of tell people what I'm observing, but also for me not to really get involved in trading so much. It's just we're just not moving. And that'll change. You just have to get through it. And I said, if you are a great scalper, you can make some money, but I'm more of a swing trader, so it's not much for me to do during the day except get trapped in some names by over trading. And then I kind of came back and said this, at the end of the day, today's range. Being patient is one of the hardest things to do in trading, especially if you're an active trader. But you just have to realize, from the time that I've been trading, which is years and years and years, that's the hardest thing to learn, is that the market, you can't control what the market is going to do, but what you can control is how your behavior is. So, and really trying to cut down on over trading is what I try to do in general, but especially when we've got something like this, which is a mess. So what else am I looking at? Let's go over to oil. I don't like this move that's going on in oil right now. I also just mentioned that I think protecting your capital a little bit right now is also paramount too, because things are breaking down. I see a lot of things now. They haven't. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say. It's an ongoing process. I haven't seen a ton of things. I've gone over in past videos what I think is really getting hit pretty hard, like emerging markets. But I'm also seeing things like crude now start to break down. It's back to where it was here, so kind of a false move. So we'll keep an eye on that. Copper is a big one. Copper was down 1.4%. If you look, it did take out that downside virgin point of control. I think this might be interesting. I think out of the commodities, this one is the one that I'm most closely watching. I think copper moving down is not a great sign for the overall market. It's very highly correlated to emerging markets, which are continuing to fall. They were up yesterday, but down another 0.5%. So things are going to be getting really dicey if we continue to push lower. 39. I'll just wait for Thinkorswim to adjust here, but maybe that's all it's going to do. 39. There we go. 39.63 is the level to watch for emerging markets. If we can hold that, very similarly, if we switch over, so when I'm watching in the U.S. IWM, you're not going to see much here on the weekly chart, but let's go to the 1 hour. The level to watch for the rest of the week is 152.20. Notice that we touched that this morning and held it, but I showed this chart around midday today, the daily chart. I mean, which way do you think this is leaning? I think that from a technical aspect that this is leaning to the downside here, and I'm worried that this is going to break and hit that and get down to this virgin point of control, which is down at 146. That also would be very ugly, I think, for the markets. But again, emerging markets, copper, IWM, these are some of the top things that I look to kind of get a little bit of an early take. I think they're early indications. I think they're leading for the overall market. So that's why I pay such close attention. And if all of these things are leaning to the downside, what do? I take less risk. I really do. And going back to what I said in the beginning of the video, trying not to overtrade, but being very mindful of your positions, your option positions, which are most sensitive. I would be very careful of those because those can move. Going back to the S&P, it's not really revealing its direction yet, right? I've got a new trend line that I've drawn in here, and I said this yesterday on Twitter. I said we're so close to getting back into value. It will only take one day, like one day where we actually move during the day. But we're really close to getting back inside value. So again, with some of these things, and same thing with IWM, while it's leaning to the downside, if buyers come in one day and give a push momentum to the upside, that's going to help. But I think going back to what we're not seeing in the technicals, markets are really moving on the headlines, and I think people are spooked. You have to put yourself in the shoes of a institutional portfolio manager. Are you in this circumstance where we don't know how China is going to retaliate, if they're going to retaliate, would you really want to go out on a limb and start adding a ton of risk? To me, that's just not prudent. Now, I don't know if we're ever going to get the all clear right now in terms of China saying that they're not going to retaliate to U.S. companies. So that's kind of where we are. We're in limbo right now. And that G20, I think it's a G20 meeting, isn't for till a month away. So, which apparently Trump and Xi are going to meet. So that's the whole thing. So what am I looking at besides this? So this gives me a very cloudy picture right now. I start to just kind of see what we're seeing in option activity. Option activity, I mean, there is some risk taking. I see a lot of two-way in names like Alibaba, two-way in FXI, so China-related stuff, a lot of two-way flows. We are seeing some little bits and pieces, like there's been a repeat call buyer in NTES. Twitter, we've been seeing some call activity, so let's start to look at a couple charts. I think Twitter is actually interesting. We started to see in the first 15 minutes of the day a little bit of a bid go into, again, so this is not, it's like a lot of charts you're going to see are teasing right now. They're big teases. Just like in the first 15 minutes of the day, we started to see things like Netflix, Facebook catch a bid, and then it just dried up. But Twitter is close, right? The top of value was 38.95. And it does help, I will tell you this, to have some value. The valuers are really nice to have some discipline. on your charts to say, hey, this I'm going to wait for this level, or this is a level as a breakout. I wanted to just give you an example of Amazon, for example. This has been doing this now for a couple days. Again, so what I've been talking about is today's price action, but this stuff has been going on now for days where we're not really moving. Here's, normally when you see something like this, right, a move where you get out of the day's range and just starting to kind of pop, and then you get the bar. This happened like this 5 minute bar right at the end of this bar and faded, and then you just turn the other way and chop. So to me, again, just shows that nobody is really showing any commitment to buying anything. Netflix, the beginning of the day. So if you're really quick, as I said on private Twitter today, if you're really quick scalping, this was the first thing that I said this morning. Yeah, I was showing the S&P. Today could set up for some day trades, but keep in mind how price action is behaving. Spurts of buying and selling with little follow through, right? So this is what I said pre-market. So not going. So again, I would rather be calling really nice trades than calling that the action is going to be chopped. But it is what it is. I can't control the market obviously moving. What I can control is my risk taking. So again, sorry to say the same thing. What I thought was pretty interesting at the end of the day, there was some buying going on into healthcare. So you could see that the volume pick up in some of these things. I'm just looking at the 5 minute bars, but it looks like I'm not sure what this action is after hours, but maybe a little bit of selling here. But you could see some volume picking up in some names. So I'm going to start with one of the best one. Actually, let me start with the whole group, with the healthcare group. This is XLV. I like XLV out of IBB and XBI because the options are super cheap. So if you're an option trader, the thing is it just needs to go, it needs to move a little bit more. So I did start a position in this today, but if you go to the weekly chart, and I sent out this chart earlier, it's got to get basically, it's got to close above value for the week, 90.33. If it can't do it this week, then maybe next week. But that's what I would be watching out. You could draw some type of a trend line in here too, but I think 90.33 is where I'm really going to be liking the group. If you move to IBB, which is large, it's market cap weighted biotech, so the larger companies get the higher weight. Notice that it held support on the weekly. All the price action for the year has been inside value, so a tough looking trade for the most part. It did close right at the bottom of value here in IBB. XBI, which is equally weighted biotech, so the small names get the same representation as the large names. It did take out a virgin point of control. Don't really have a signal yet. There was a little bit of call activity yesterday. I think there was calls bought and put sold. So, but still, I'm not going to go on about option activity because a lot of it that we see doesn't work. So you kind of have to make your own your own system up in terms of if you want to get into a trade, what your stop and where your targets would be. So XBI not jumping off the screen to me. But if we start to drill down into some names, I think one of the best looking names out there is Sage. I went long this name today. I spotted this earlier in the day, but wanted to make sure that it closed. But look at the consolidation. So this is kind of what I look for a lot of times in charts, is when you have a consolidation like this and then a move outside of range. Right, and you can see you've got an MACD crossover coupled with that. So I am looking for Sage to go higher. I went and bought stock in this one because I know the options are ridiculous. Sage. Then if you start to look at some other names within the group, look at what I think Merck is a leader in the pharma space. Really nice close above value. So you got your confirmation, a move outside of the range, and now a closing. You could set your if you like this name, you could go long here with a stop right at $80. I think that looks good. I'm also looking at some names like this one's not ready yet, but on my radar, Zoetis, really strong, has had some good Good earnings the last couple quarters, and it's just trying to break out here a bit. Not yet, though. What else do we spot today? BSX does not look bad. It needs a little bit more momentum to it. TMO, really nice move today on the back of their analyst day. So this was one of the better performers in the group. I still like Abbott as well, which just hasn't been doing anything over the last 2 weeks. It's holding the bottom of value, but I so why am I focused on this group too? Because certainly we've seen all kinds of defensive groups, like XLU, which there was a little bit of a call buyer today, and NEE, which is probably the best looking utility out there. But we've seen this move into a lot of defensives. I've been talking about, I think one of the most interesting things going on in the ETF world is money that continues to flow into these minimum and low volatility ETFs. So had good volume again in this today. Had a pretty decent size inflow, and you could. It was one of the first tweets that I sent out today, but nice big volume, and I think it was around $200 million inflow, somewhere in that range. But certainly we've seen this in REITs, we've seen this in consumer staples. So these are all defensive groups. So I would think, barring any political stuff going on about drug pricing, I would think that healthcare would start to kind of move together with those groups. So that's what I'm watching. Notice I'm not talking too much about tech. I just think it right now, if you're long some of these groups, I think it's better to be long stock or at least options that are further out while we're not moving right now. But I think that's enough for today's video. And yeah, you just kind of have to give it a little bit of patience. I wouldn't go so much doom and gloom yet, although, again, I don't like what I'm seeing in the majority of my leading indicators, but that could flip around in a day. For now, I remain positioned lighter until I get the signals that I'm looking for, and we'll continue to monitor these in the trading room on a day-to-day basis. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.